This is the Get a Life Podcast, Ex-Cult Conversations.
We are here today with Richard, Carmen, and a very special guest, Christine, who is going to walk us through what it's like to work for the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. She's going to let us know how long she's worked for them, what it was like, what kind of goes on behind the scenes. And I'll let you take that away, Christine. If you just want to start off with letting us know, let the listeners know how long you've worked with EB, the Exclusive Brethrens, and how long you worked for them and what it was like.
Okay, so hello everyone. Very firstly, to start, I'm French, but I came to live in New Zealand in 2006, and shortly afterwards I started having my first EB. I still call them the Exclusive Brethren. I had my first EB customer, and straight away I noticed something was really weird. Their computer was very archaic. They didn't have internet connections. I mean, it was really weird. They gave my contact details to other brethren because I liked the job, and that's how I started to basically work for quite a few of them. I think I counted, I may have forgotten some of them, but I think I counted 19 over 16 years,
Wow.
19 different businesses. Yeah. Now, the funny thing was, at some point, I had to work for someone else who was building a database, and it had something definitely a religious connotation to it, because I could see that there was something with Friday, Saturday, and the Lord's Supper. So I realized that it was religious, but the problem was there was never any data in it. And when I came to the point where I had to do extractions and test queries, as it's called, I just couldn't do my job because of that, the lack of data. So at some point I said, hey, tell me, who are you? And that's when the guy responded, oh, we are the Exclusive Brethren. Have you not heard of us? I said, heck no, what the heck is that? You know, I come from an area where we have Catholics, Protestants, Jewish people, Muslims, and that's pretty much it. But we don't have all those subgroups of Protestants. So yeah, next thing I do is I go back home and I start searching on the web. And that's when I found references to the book of Nairi Thomas. You probably have all read it, Behind Closed Doors.
Yeah.
And, you know, at that time, I had been working probably for 3-4 of their businesses. And I must say, they have always been pretty nice with me when I was a contractor, because after 16 years, 14 were as a contractor. And they really treated me well. When I read the book from Nairi Thomas, I was thinking, that's really weird. You know, maybe it's someone who is just disgruntled, which can happen. But still, I was curious about the whole thing. So I just kept observing. And that is when I started to see, I mean, you know, the funny little things like the kids coming out of school. I think the two I can think of were 16, 17. As soon as they saw me, they turned their back. Or when I was at the computer, they turned around. Little stupid little things like that. Didn't talk very much. Another thing that you quite often get is side looks. Right? So they look that way and then the eyes turn to look quickly at you. And as soon as you look at them, they look the other way. And a lot of adults are actually doing that. So the next thing was probably a couple of years after that, I got the hold of the book from Michael Bachelard. Yeah. And well, that was very interesting. Okay. And I started to see some very common features between what I observed and what Michael was talking about. I started to notice, you know, all the things about the women, the fact they had those things in the hair, the fact they wear the dresses, they were always a little bit more in the back and so on. And I just kept observing. After that, basically, I did not work for them too much for probably 4 or 5 years. I had a child, so less work. And ultimately, in 2018, I became full-time employee with one of the businesses I had worked for right from the start. And that is when I really started, you know, the curtain opened. That's when you just start to see the ugliness of the whole thing. Okay, we can go into the details afterwards, but yeah, that's really when I started to see what was happening in there. They treated us They try to treat us fairly, but it's not fair. Okay. And COVID happened, and they started to do a restructure. They were actually not the only ones. I found other businesses, brethren businesses, who used exactly the same techniques to get rid of employees. And what they did on that one is they had, of course, they wanted to preserve the jobs of the brethren employees. So they actually manipulated everything to make sure that the brethren were going to keep their jobs and the non-brethren wouldn't. For myself, I was dedicated. I'm a hard worker, and I was actually praised by them quite a lot because of that, the ethics, working lots hours and everything. I was at the time filling in 3 positions within the business. On top of it, they got me to work for another company as well as UBT. So I was really in overload of work at the time. And when the restructure came, they asked me to do exactly the same job, but half of the time. So that's when I said, bye-bye. Bye-bye. And I left. I resigned. That's pretty much the background.
And so what were some of the key differences that you noticed of how you were treated versus how they were treated?
There are so many different ones. There is perhaps the most important one is benefits, advantages. Okay, when you're a brethren, quite often you get business cars, even if it's not necessarily required for your position. It's also a fact that I noticed they use that in order to hold the young ones back. They get them nice cars that those younger people would like, and it's all little ways and means to keep them within the system. I know of one of the brethren in one of those businesses. He even had a car for the wife who did not work for the business.
Wow.
Pay-wise, I have been told, because what I have not told you yet is I have been in contact with a lot of people who have left working for the cult, and some of them had some more information about pay and that sort of things. Sorry, I mixed up my words here. And apparently the brethren are paid sometimes up to twice as much as non-brethren for same job.
Wow.
Yep. Twice as much, exactly the same job, paid twice as much. The other thing is when you are a woman, when you are a woman, you basically may get a management role, but only if you are dealing with other women. You won't have a man. You won't have a man under you as a woman.
So you saw a significant difference on how women were presented within jobs.
When it comes to non-brethren women, yes, definitely. Okay. There was also always, that situation where you just had that feeling that men were more important. I was taken a few times where I don't shut up. Okay, I'm never shutting up. When I want to say something, I say it to the person. And I had a few altercations with my manager. He was a 20-year-old. Everyone called him the corporate psychopath. But my word, what? That's what he was, psychopath.
I love it.
And so basically, when I challenged him, it was never the agreement, was never with me. Okay, it always had to go to the person above, S, who, not going to name him, but he was the CEO of the company, and he was always trying, to work around it to make sure that the brethren guy was going to be right. Really, really bloody annoying. And of course, the more they did that sort of things, the more vocal I became.
Oh, and I'm sure they loved that.
I mean, I did not, because that was not a thing. I didn't show him the respect that he would have expected from a brethren woman. Okay, because brethren women, I mean, that was obvious. A man says something, the women just does it. Okay, not for me. I'm sorry, that didn't work. Okay, if I had something to tell, I told him, and if he was a dork, I'm sorry, but we just said it. And yes, it was interesting times.
So when you we're getting on this topic of women and what you observed from the brethren women, like how, when you compare yourself as a woman compared to women inside the PBCC, what did you notice about them? Like what was so different in their interactions with the men and just their role inside the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church?
Subservient. Okay, when S, the CEO, turned up and he was in a foul mood, you had them all putting their head down, and the answer was always yes. There was no challenging him whatsoever. Okay, they always did what they were told to do.
Wow.
Yep.
And I mean, we experienced it firsthand. And I mean, Carmen more so than myself, but it is like women are there to, cook, clean, make babies, and keep that spouse happy.
And that's what we had, at work. We had food was in the last one, food was provided, but of course it was always a woman who was doing it, trying to please the guys, pleasing the man as much as possible, making them happy.
And I mean, I think that's where a lot of their problems start with, right? Is like that, having that male hierarchy and all the females underneath being so submissive to it is where we get this, the new term in there that we just figured out this week is ecosystem. It's something that, Dean Hales has used this week in his global Zoom call he did with everybody, is he refers to these females as being a part of their ecosystem. But I mean, when you sit back, and I've talked to quite a few people who have worked for the Brethren, including you, and you get all the same story about these women who are just so literally just serve the men.
Yes.
And when I think about this whole ecosystem that Dean Hales talks about, I'm like, what an unbalanced ecosystem. And it just opens up for such chaos to ensue within all of this.
Yeah. The one thing I struggled to understand is I was actually talking a lot to the younger people. Okay. For some reason, I had always it always went well with the younger generation. And at some point when I was asking one of the younger girls, she was talking of, one day she's going to get married and, she will stop working. I said, look, you're actually really very good when it comes down to work. You're really a working woman, in the way, as you can imagine, from the outside world. She wasn't interested in that. She was very much looking forward to raising children, doing what all the other women were doing, which was, school pickups, school drop-offs. These days, there is quite a bit of, what's their shopping center called? Campus & Co. The women are, the women are quite involved in Campus & Co. I understand they are not paid for what they are doing.
No, it's volunteer.
It's completely, the cult is making money on those women providing work. That's not right.
Yeah.
And
so
I know.
Go ahead,
talking
Carmen.
to somebody the other day, and she worked in a situation where the boss's son was supposed to be learning from her. And she was like yourself. She had never been a part of the Plymouth Brethren. And she was supposed to be training him how to do this job. And so she would, tell him to follow her and how to do it. And he turned around, he was half her age, and he turned around and said, I take orders from no woman.
Yep.
And I thought, how disrespectful. She's assigned the job of training him, but this 20-year-old turns around and says, I take orders from no woman.
Yeah.
I
have seen quite a few of them. I remember one of the other businesses I worked for, there was a bunch of, young men between the age of 20 and 35, I would say. And I gave them a hard time too. I suppose it has shocked them a little bit, but yeah. Basically, what you have to understand is that when the restructure came and when I resigned, I was a little bit surprised that the manager or the CEO, didn't try to keep me back, because we always had a very good relationship. But it's afterwards, talking to ex-brethren, that I started to realize why I was becoming a persona non grata. Okay, it's because I did not respect those guys. I didn't put them on a pedestal, if that's the right word. Yeah, I just met, sometimes fun. If they gave me a hard time, ping pong is a nice game. I gave the hard time back.
I love it.
And I didn't like that.
So did you have to follow their dress code? Like, were you required to wear the skirts and?
Okay, I'm going to tell you a pretty funny one for that one. Yes, as a contractor, I didn't have to. Okay. But when I became a full-time employee, yes, there was a dress code. The dress code was not so much of an issue for me initially. Yeah, didn't mind. But I know that for some people, it's really flipping annoying wearing those skirts. And one day I was wearing a shirt, that's why I'm wearing that today, to give you an idea of the depth of my cleavage. And I had one of those young, it's pretty bad, isn't it? I had one of those young girls who I knew for quite a few years. She came, she said, "Oh, Chris, I preferred so much what you were wearing last week." And I said, "Oh, thank you very much. Why is that?" "Oh, the colors, and especially, the neckline, it was so much nicer than that one. That one is a little bit too deep." I said, "Okay, thank you." Went straight up to the boss and I said, "Hey, my colleague is calling me a slut for turning up at work with a cleavage like that. Is it indecent? Can you see my boobs?" And he said, "No. And let me deal with that." So he went away. He talked to the girl and came back to me and said, "Hey, look, I apologize on her behalf. She should not have said that to you." But it's honestly, it's silly. I mean, the other thing is, I remember at some point I was at UBT. Okay, we had those video. One day we had to watch a video. It started first of all about hygiene. Wow, fantastic! Your boss tells you that you need to be clean. Is it not common sense? The second topic was skirt length. Now that is where one of my colleagues and I, she was also non-brethren, we started really giggling in the background, because you had all those brethren girls that they put in the front offices, where people can see them, wearing those really mini skirts, much higher than the knee level. And you can see them constantly trying to pull down. But it's just ridiculous. The dress code at some point, because I had to go and I had quite often I'm doing IT, so I had sometimes to go under the tables to do some cabling stuff and so on. And at some point we were not allowed trousers, so I went under the table with my skirt, and as the CEO came in suddenly and said, "What's that? Who's that?" I said, "It's me, S. Not allowed to wear trousers. So I hope you enjoyed the view." So called into his office again. Then he tells me, "Hey, look, you can wear some trousers if you have a job like that." I say, "Hey, look, that's just not practical. Okay, I'm not going to have a look. Oh, hang on, I need to put on my trousers." I move away, put them on, do my job, change again into a skirt. That doesn't work. So it's going to be either the skirt and you enjoy the view, or it's the trousers. So
how did you find, what was it like emotionally and mentally working for them?
Sometimes draining, because they put a lot of pressure on you. Okay. And they question every single judgment you make, which is quite funny, because questioning is not the big thing within the brethren, right? But they're questioning other people about the efficiency or the work. And especially when it's someone like the psychopath, he was questioning every single decision I made. One day I remember we were talking about a hard drive. We needed a new hard drive, and discussion went on and on. it's too expensive, blah, 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 blah. Took me 5 minutes to understand that he was thinking a server rather than a hard drive. Okay, so how do you want to work with someone like that? It's just not.
Did you notice a
Yeah.
difference in the amount he questioned you versus like male employees?
No, he was a horrible person. He is a horrible person. Okay, he did exactly the same. You know, when I got my new job after working for the last brethren, every time I went to the toilet, I actually said to my manager, "Hey, I'm just going to the toilet." At some point, he said, "Hey, Chris, you don't have to tell me that." And that's when I started to realize, you know, how much the whole brethren thing had actually taken over me. And why did I say that? Very simply, when our sycophant came into the office, oh, who is she? Who is she? Who is him? He, and so on. He always wanted, you know, to know where everyone was, what we were doing, and so on, to the point where we basically always, oh, look, he's just dropping off a parcel, she's having a break. We always had to explain things. Annoying. It's the same person. He treated one of those young brethren boys horribly. The kid at some point said, "Hey, look, I'm not your slave." I heard the psychopath saying to him, "Hey, look, you know, at work, the relationship is a bit like that of a master and a servant and a slave." And he went into explaining why.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
Abuse of power. That's what it is to me.
And I know you've done an excellent article called "Working for the Exclusive Brethren." I'll most likely attach maybe a link to it or something, but it's such a good explanation from somebody on the outside to show how their doctrine it's also in their business. And when you take somebody who hasn't been born into it and then gets plugged into all of this systemic cult-like rules, how hard it is. Like, how hard was that for you to be able to have to literally almost, it's like being indoctrinated into their practices when you weren't even born into it?
Well, the thing is, you know, it's you feel dirty. You feel like you are not worth much. To give you the example of what I call the eating matter, I know it's I think you guys call it the same. When in the business, sometimes they provide food. Okay, even if they don't, non-brethren and brethren never eat together. Sometimes what they do is they have one shift, for example, 12 to 12 and a half, where the brethren are going to eat, followed by the non-brethren afterwards. Or like it happened in some businesses where there was a separation, okay, like a semi-wall or planters or things like that. And you had the brethren on one side, and then you had, you know, like sort of the staff, the rest of them, the worldlies, as they called us.
So they called.
I didn't understand. I didn't know that initially, but it was because to also let you know, the document I sent you, Cheryl, it's not me alone. We were over 30 people who have put all those foods together. Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a lady who explained to me very early on that we are the worldlies, whilst they are the chosen one, you know, the saints or whatever they call themselves. So you already, when you start working for them, you have that feeling of being a lesser person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
did you find yourself like, I mean, we all talk about the brainwashing that goes on. You talked a little bit about that, but can you expand a little bit more on how you felt that brainwashing taking over you?
The value of work, for example. Okay, so everyone knows probably that the brethren work hard. You got to give them that. Okay, they are early at work and they are late at work. So that is, I'm also a hard worker, perhaps not to that extent like them, but I was quite often praised for that sort of things. Okay, for my hard work, all these different things. Yeah, that's perhaps the most important that I can think of.
Mm-hmm.
right now. Yeah,
And
the
when you,
brainwashing. I mean, from brainwashing doesn't really go down onto me too much. All right. I noticed, there's a little insidious little things like telling where you are when you're not at your desk. That was one, but yeah.
Yeah, I know I've talked to people outside that have been worked for the Brethren, and one person in particular, and it really, she got so brainwashed in there that she didn't see a way out. And it's hard.
In which way? In which way?
They had just, a lot of things had gone on. We're hoping to have her on this podcast, so I'm hoping at some point she will come on. But it's just, there was a lot of the same doctrines that we had to go through growing up, they placed on her, but it really affected her, right? It really affected her, and she didn't see a way out of the job when she wanted to quit. Like they had gotten so far into her that she didn't see a way out. Yeah,
because there is just, it's interesting. Just this morning, I met one of my ex-colleagues. He actually returned back to working for them. What happens is they take people with the carrot. They generally have a tendency to pay better than other employers in the area. And especially these days with the current situation, people think twice before leaving a job. Okay, and I think that is the way that they have the most control over people, is the wages. The higher wages, that they pay. Yeah. But I mean, it's other things. I've been told that a lady, she had a bit of tendency to say, "Oh my God," she was, for example, called into to the head of the business, who asked her, "Do not, name the name of the Lord in vain," that sort of things. Yeah.
Yeah.
In another business, they actually even made a comment to a customer about the same topic. And that's church things. That's your belief. That's personal. Wow. It shouldn't go further to your employees or your customers.
Wow. And before you were hired, did they go through all these rules of what you weren't allowed to do and what you were allowed to do?
With me, it was really different to a standard employment. I had worked for them as a contractor for many years. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it was, yes, we did get, in our employment agreement, there are some of the rules. I think I did send you one, didn't I? I did send you one where.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. You can read it. Yeah, go ahead.
I actually don't have it in front of me. Do you mind reading it?
Yeah, the employment contract?
Yep.
Yeah. So it says, all employees are expected to abide by the company's dress code as set out below. No exposed body piercings or tongue studs. Jewelry is limited to plain wedding ring only. Male staff members are to wear long pants in the course of their duties unless personal protective clothing is worn. Male staff to be clean shaven at all times. Facial hair, beards and mustaches is not permitted, and sideburns are not to be excessively long. Female administration staff are required to wear skirts. Hair that is longer than collar must be tied back and kept off the face with plain accessories.
Yes. So, we did sometimes feel, as a woman, we were forced to wear the skirt, which is, at the end of the day, an advantage in summer when it's really hot. But think of the poor guys who were sometimes working in warehouses having to wear long trousers. It's just horrible. Why? Because the cult has decided that within the cult, it's not allowed. It shouldn't be allowed for anyone else. Were they scared that, cult people would suddenly ask to also wear shorts?
Mm-hmm.
It's, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's in all honesty, they need to not hire people outside of the Brethren. It needs to stay just Brethren within Brethren.
Just they can't. They can't. They don't have the skills.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
and it's just hard to hear the stories that I've come up against with people who have worked for them and then come out after.
Now, can I say something on that topic here?
Mm-hmm.
During the restructure, when once I resigned, I just couldn't understand. My thing was constantly, why has S done that to me? Because we always had a good working relationship.
Mhm.
And I went into a very, very, very somber state. I actually had suicidal thoughts. Okay. One morning, my boy was leaving for school, and I said him bye in a very weird way. Fortunately, my husband noticed that something was really different here, and he came back straight away, and we started talking about the whole thing. And I went to seek help for it. But I wasn't the only one. I had another friend who said his wife said, "Hey, you're not going to commit suicide, because when it doesn't end well, they put a lot of pressure on you." I know that some people got letters from lawyers, extreme harsh letters from lawyers accusing them of having done this or that. They treat you sometimes like shit.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
You know?
And what was the punishment like there in workplaces? Not necessarily even just with yourself, but other stories that you have heard.
Yeah, well, for the punishment, it was generally, depending on what the problem was, it was firm voices, firm orders from the hierarchy. Okay, and then everyone was just basically going and doing what they said. But I witnessed something which I found absolutely disgusting. There was a girl. I had quite often some discussions with her, and she seemed to have been quite troubled. She was on medication, which, by the way, many of the other young ones were on medication as well. And at some point, she was ostracized somewhere else in a business where she couldn't be in touch, in contact with other employees. To me, that was very much like what I hear in your podcast about your shunning. She was still working. She was an important person, but they moved her completely away.
Wow.
Okay.
So do
I
you
had
know if that,
another. Sorry.
do you know if she was actually being shunned or restricted in the church at the same time?
I don't know that. No,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
I would
no.
say almost certainly that would be the situation, that she had done something that the church considered morally wrong. So she would not have been allowed to attend church meetings. She would not have been allowed to socialize with her family. And so equally, they would isolate her in the workplace for the same reason.
Okay.
That would be standard practice.
I noticed it, when it happened at the time, but not really knowing what was happening there.
Yes.
All I was told is that she needed a bit more space.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
And but it's only afterwards, over the last couple of years since I left, that I started to realize that it was most likely a shunning that had happened there.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
it would have been. Yeah.
There was another one where I was, at the time I was still a contractor, and I had to walk down a long corridor to go to the CEO's office. And that is when I could hear, once I was walking down the corridor, I could hear him telling off a young girl for possessing or having a magazine, a worldly type of magazine. And oh goodness, that was not, it was very dominant over the girl. But hey, she answered back. Yeah, she answered back. And just as I came, he took the magazine and threw it to her and said, "You know what to do with that." And that was it. She then left. But again, how come that someone who is not a parent or relative tells her off for that sort of things like that? They the men put themselves into that position of superiority over the women, and it can be quite intimidating.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, one thing I've experienced and observed is that brethren businesses are very good at what we would call constructive dismissal. So that rather than actually firing someone or dismissing someone, in which case they would have to pay, severance money or something, they just make your life so miserable that you resign. And then, of course, they've got no obligation to you because you've done the resignation.
Yep.
I mean, in my case, I was working for a business and they decided to get rid of me. I was a technical consultant, and so every day the jobs would come onto my computer or my desk. Solve this problem, solve that problem. And one day the jobs just stopped coming. Just nothing came to my desk. Nothing was referred to me. And I didn't really understand anything was wrong for 2 or 3 days. I thought, well, just very, very quiet at the moment. And eventually realized that this was just their way of getting rid of me. And then of course, two of my children were working in the business. And strangely, one of my daughter was suddenly demoted. Suddenly, my daughter, who used to be like the PA to one of their top salesmen, suddenly she was working in the packing department.
Oh, wow.
And my son was getting in trouble. They're pulling my son in for lectures. And in hindsight, the whole thing was a very carefully calculated strategy and scheme to make me so upset that I would resign, that I would walk out.
And
Richard, and that's what happened.
Richard, that is exactly what happened in that restructure where I resigned. That's exactly the method they used with people. I actually have proofs, which I don't want to show to not put someone in dire situation. But that's exactly what I've done. Okay, they change things around. For example, a person was in competition with a non-brethren, so suddenly they move him into that new position, say he's going to compete with the other person. So at the end of the day, the brethren is going to win the job. The other person, the non-brethren, the non-brethren was really, they got letters from lawyers and things like that. So he resigned. And the brethren guy worked in the position for 6 months. Then he went back to his previous position and they employed someone new. Lots of tactics like that. Another thing that happens quite often is when the school leavers, the brethren school leavers, every year, that is a little bit of a potentially dangerous time for non-brethren, because depending on what the position is, the person, the brethren is going to come in. You have to teach the job, and after a little while they push you on the side. And yes, just like you said, you get less work, you don't necessarily know what happens, and you already know that you're already on the,
on the way out.
On the way out. Yep.
Yes, and then they start picking holes and finding faults. So in my case, there was a particular decision that was made in a technical area to pursue a certain solution that was quite expensive. And I eventually went and demanded, I said to the management, but why are you not giving me any work? What's going on here? And they said, oh, well, there was this decision that was made, and, we felt that was the wrong decision. I pointed out that I hadn't made that decision. I had made the suggestion and referred it to a colleague who was also a technical person, and that person had said, yes, we're going to go ahead with that. It wasn't even my decision. And they hadn't, and this was something that had happened 4 or 5 months previously, and they hadn't said anything about it at the time. So they're just like trying to find fault with you, find some excuse to, not to fire you because they don't want to do that, because then there could be legal repercussions, but to upset you enough
to go
that you fire yourself.
One of my colleagues always said, he or she is now the flavor of the month. Okay, the flavor of the month. Do you know what I'm talking about? So suddenly they get that new employee in, could be a brethren, could be a non-brethren, and the person is, almost the solution to everything. Okay, but then they cannot keep their nose out of other people's business. They constantly shoot into those new people's feet. And as it goes up, it goes down. Okay, suddenly the person becomes less and less the flavor of the month, and someone new comes in.
I mean, it's very interesting you're talking about when the school leavers come in, because it comes at a particular time each year when they graduate. And of course, within the brethren, those school leavers, they have to work for brethren businesses. And so effectively, all the brethren employees in the catchment area, that are within a commuting distance of that school, they have to, between them, provide that number of jobs, regardless of whether they've got suitable employment or not.
Yeah.
And what happens is it's very much like a slave auction, because what the business owners will all meet up. They usually will meet up, at a school or one of their business premises, and they will kind of divvy up these people between them. And the ones that are very talented, they will fight over. And then they're left with the ones which, the ones that have, are maybe not academic, maybe they're good at sports and music, but of course that doesn't help in a brethren business. And so you get these kind of like the bottom of the bin, if you like. And they actually call them charity cases. That's the term that's used in the brethren, charity cases. So then they kind of do another kind of bargaining where they say, oh, well, you had so-and-so last year, so you've got to have this one this year. And it's all quite public, and these people, these young people who are not brilliant accountants, because that's all the brethren really want is brilliant accountants. They're made to feel that they're being taken on and given a job out of pity. And they're made to feel that they're a burden on the business. And I mean, that's the cruelest thing, because in the world at large, in the real world, if you were brilliant at music or sport, or a whole list of other things that brethren are not allowed to go into, you could make that your career. You could make your career in education. You could be a teacher. You could be a geologist, and you could teach at a university. Young people in the brethren, if they're not, either got talent at being a salesman or an accountant or something of that nature, that very, very centrally business related, they have no career at all.
For girls, it's simple. It's an admin job.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Girls, it's admin jobs. For the boys, depending on what the business is doing, either they are going to join the production line, or if they have more brains, probably, they will start to do finance, sales. But that is really generally the limit to it. They have very, very few possibilities within there.
And I think too that they use the money to keep those kids in there. So we obviously have contacts inside who give us information. And so this is some of the newer information that we've gotten. So starting wage is around 80,000 for boys just out of school. If you are married, the wage is between 120,000 minimum, and often over 200,000 for people with kids. And so when I heard that, I was like, okay, so they definitely are using their pocketbook to keep those kids inside there, and this is one of the ways they do. Like if you're given enough money, well, of course you're gonna stay, right? Yeah.
And it's not just the money, it's also, as I said earlier, the cars, things like that. I believe they help them with the houses if they have a loan.
Yeah, very much they do.
Yeah.
But the point is, it's actually illegal, because if they've got non-brethren employees doing the same job, or non-brethren employees who are often much more highly qualified, because non-brethren employees will have university qualifications, it's illegal to pay different amounts for the same job. It's religious discrimination. I mean, it's just as if, imagine there was a large business and it paid all its Muslim employees half the wage it paid its Christian employees. That would be exactly the same situation. It's discrimination on the basis of religion. And so you'll find that brethren companies are very, very secretive about the wages they pay their brethren employees.
Oh, the wages is a topic.
Non-brethren employees realized how underpaid they were, that they would take it to court and they would win, because it's illegal to discriminate in that way.
Yep. I was just thinking of what else.
What did you learn about alcohol and it with the kids inside there?
All right. So first thing, pretty much second or third day I turned up in that office when I became full-time. I said something about alcohol. Oh, goodness me, the reaction I got. It was almost like if I had aggressed or shot at everyone, It's, what? We don't have a problem with alcohol. I said, no, I didn't say you had a problem with alcohol. So that was really an interesting reaction. A bit later, I started to ask the young ones when they had their first, strong alcohol. And the youngest person was 11, and the age was between 11 and 13. Strong alcohol,
40%.
It's, yeah. And then the funny thing is, do you know that I actually managed to get brethren to eat or at least drink something with me? Because I have very nice alcohol, and I was mentioning it to them, and I said, look, if it's okay, if it's the boss says yes, I'm going to bring it in. And the boss said yes, and so I brought it in. I brought the little shot glasses, and guess what? We all had strong alcohol together.
So it's alcohol that does it.
You got it. So all you got to do, bring whatever blue labels. They were really very careful. The eating thing was very, very serious. Okay, generally brethren on one side, non-brethren on the other side, but the alcohol, wow, just like that.
Yeah.
Well, I think all their principles go out the window when alcohol's involved.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I completely agree. Yeah. So I'm just kind of going through. I know we had so much topics to discuss here, right? And something that just kind of catches my eye here is somebody that we all know, and I know Craig won't care that we talk about him. So we got the Craig Hoyle topic. So
yes.
What was your impression? What did you get from that being inside?
Okay. So basically, every single time the brethren were in the news, I said, "Oh, guys, you're in the news again," and so we were an office of 5-6 people. Okay, most of them are brethren. I was not, so I love to tease. And so when there was an article of Craig Hoyle, so that one person said, "Oh, what is it? Who is it?" I said, "Craig Hoyle." "Oh, he's a bad man." I said, "What do you mean?" "Oh, no. You must not listen. You must not read it. He's a really bad man." I said, "But hey, don't you think that he's homosexual? If he has been absolutely rejected by the whole community, by his parents, by his family, by everything, don't you think it's normal that he leaves and that he actually speaks out about his experience? Has God not created us all equal in his image? Who are you guys to judge him for his sexuality?" Now, what happens is I have worked with homosexual people in my past. And so the topic was very important. We had a big discussion with that person and myself. It was just, the ignorance. And when I started mentioning the same topic to another person, it was the same answer. "Oh, he's a bad man." And that is when I was thinking, oh, fantastic, working with parrots,
Yes.
They are very anti.
Well, at least they're straight parrots, aren't they?
Yeah.
Oh, it's sometimes you hear exactly the same. That's the other thing. When you talk with them, you hear exactly the same sentence coming out, and that's where you wonder, oh, is it still a personal choice, or is that where the cult is starting to
It is. Yeah.
to have an influence? Yeah.
And it is one of the saddest things because it's just, you think of how many people that are in there that are hiding their sexuality because they're so anti-gay, right? They're just so, it breaks my heart to know of how many people that must be just hiding in the closet in there.
Same, Cheryl. At some point, I had to work for one of them. I must be very careful because I don't want him to have any problems, okay? Yeah. But he was definitely gay, okay? He was definitely gay, but he played the appearances, he just did what was expected of him. And I felt so sorry for that guy for not being able to actually live his life.
Yeah.
Because of what a cult says. No way.
Yeah.
It's
sad. It's sad.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is. But they're very judgmental, generally speaking. There are the rules, the norms based on the brethren, and you either fit in or you are bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you really find like a hierarchy happening between the rich and the poor? Like, did you find that?
Oh, no, not at all. Of course, they're all the same, right? According to the text. And no, there is definitely a horrible hierarchy. Okay, it comes from top to bottom. You have the decision makers, those who want to be important in the church. Okay, as someone said when I asked, is my boss, is he someone important? And the person who was a leaver said, oh, not as important as he would love to be. Okay, but you have those ones who have the money. Okay, and they are basically, and then you have the other side. You have I would call them the genuine brethren. Okay, they leave the religion. Yes, we separate, we don't eat together. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I can understand it. But they were very humble. Is that the word? Humble people?
Yeah.
Okay. You could have, as a non-brethren, I had the nicest chats with the bottom layers. Okay. But they were just treated maybe with a little bit more respect than non-brethren. But still, it's there was always a smile, but it was basically, you cockroaches, you just do that, and
Yeah.
I just didn't like how they were treating, the lower ranks. Yeah.
And did you notice that that respect tended to go with certain family names? That certain families were treated with respect and others weren't?
I think I even noticed that it is the families that seem to be richer.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you the same story from the other way round, in that when I left the brethren and started working in non-brethren businesses, I was astonished at how kind of flat the management structure was, that the employees who swept the floor would chat quite happily and freely with people that are several stages higher than them. Yeah. And yes, when they were actually doing a job, one was giving the orders and one was doing manual work, but it didn't make any difference at all at a social level. And then I realized just how layered and hierarchical the brethren is, both in church and in the workplace.
Did I not also attach a picture, Cheryl, to my document?
You did, but I don't have it. I don't have it where I can. Let me see if I can show it though. It's hilarious.
If you've got it printed, you could hold it up to the camera.
I am going to. I'm going to show that. I'm going to hold it. I did print it out though. It printed out in my. It's really good. I'm not going to.
So when you are, don't show it yet. Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
there you go.
So let me just come up closer so you can actually read it. And then. So I'm going to read what it says for the listeners that aren't watching this. So it says, when top level guys look down, they see only shit. And it's this hierarchy of birds going all the way down. And at the bottom, it says, when bottom level guys look up, they see assholes.
Now,
and you can imagine what the picture looks like.
That to me was very representative. Okay. To the point where I actually printed it out and put it on my desk.
Oh, wow. That's good for you.
When it comes down, by the way, the desk policies, they have that thing of having a clean desk. Okay, so maybe a pen, always a Bible. Okay, there's always going to be a Bible. I don't think they use it, but there's always a Bible, and very minimalistic. Okay, and of course, when you are in high management, what happens is you need a notepad, you need maybe your laptop, and that's pretty much it. Okay, you're done. But when you are doing technical stuff like myself, and I had to fix computers, and I had cables and all docking stations and so on, I was told quite a few times that my desk was not to the standards. Okay, it needed to be tidier.
Wow.
And I don't consider myself as an untidy person, but I wasn't living up to their expectations, basically.
Well, your kitchen looks pretty good anyway.
I was going to say, your house looks spotless.
Even have my fern.
Very beautiful.
Thank you.
Wow.
So can you tell us a little bit about the Brethren's IT, because they have their centralized source for all their computers and all their phones, and they have their own software on them. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, since it has already been mentioned, I think by Lane, yes, there is. I mean, IT has to be purchased at UBT, and quite often it's not necessarily the latest models. It's generally more expensive as well. And they all come down. They all come locked down with that program that Lane mentioned, which is Streamline. Okay.
Yes.
So there is lots of things. I mean, it's like an internet filter, I guess I would call it. But I also understand that it has other possibilities. It can actually take screenshots of the computers at a specific interval to see, what the people have been doing. Now, I haven't personally witnessed that one. I have been told that. Okay, I don't know how true it is. It's also apparently supposed to be able to locate what a device is. I mean, it's a whole tracking, of what they are doing. I sometimes felt for those poor employees trying to get to a customer's web page. They first had to make a request to get the page unlocked. And the funny thing is, I mean, someone like me, I would have exploded after 2 days of not being able to just have a normal browsing experience.
Computer,
No, they just took it in their stride and just carried on working, waited the following day, apologized with the customer when they were late, and so on.
So they can't access the internet like we do.
Oh, certainly not. No. There is lots of business related pages that are available where they can go when it's business, especially everything that comes from UBT, all these things. But probably newspapers, I think they can have a look at. But generally, what is some? Chosen. Some.
As long as they're right-wing ones,
And I have a little quote that you've written down here about the corporate psychopaths that I can't, or it's talking about the tell us that story.
Yes. Okay. So that was with my colleague. We basically, I mean, that guy, you must have lived him to understand, okay? But he was really getting on everyone's nerve, and we were a little bit peed off because of all those blockages and all those things. And we said, hey, W, why can we not just make it open for everyone? And he was saying, oh, but there is dangerous things and so on. And my colleague said, but hey, are you not old enough, to actually make the decision between what is good from what is bad? And that is when he replied, oh, I couldn't trust myself for that.
And this is where we get into I'm going to just take this on a little sidebar here, is we talk about healthy sex education and why we come up against the issues that we're coming up against that are being so exposed right now, is that these men are not taught healthy ways and to have this organic maturity of what's right and what's wrong. I think in order for them to even try and get somewhere in their church, is they're going to have to literally go back in time and teach a man what is acceptable to what is acceptable to do to a woman and what is not acceptable, because they really don't know. And I mean, my phone has gone crazy the last 48 hours. And I just cannot get over how the men treat their women. And from these stories, I'm really realizing that they don't know any difference. And so a comment like that's why I really wanted to talk about that, is because there's a prime example of a mature adult man who wouldn't be able to trust himself. What kind of Christian church is raising humans like this?
None that I know of. I mean, the PBCC, yep.
Right? It just blows my mind. I get very heated in this kind of discussion because it's why we're in the situation that we're in. yet they just don't understand why it's happening. And right to the point now where Mr. Hales has just recently, in the Levitical meetings that happened, they're probably wondering how the heck we get all this information, but we have very good insiders. The latest thing in the Levitical meetings was he has, I don't have it word for word, but they're not supposed to be shocked at the numbers that are going to be going down. And that's not word for word, but that his reference is that if there's a lot of people going to start leaving, we can't get concerned about it. I wished I had the actual. I'd have to.
That's a good sign, actually, because he obviously realizes that that's just about to happen, isn't he?
Right, 100%. Okay, so it is the CEO, because that's what they call him, is saying we have to be okay with the reduction of numbers. So he is now preparing, because he obviously is realizing that the truth that is being spoken right now is going to have an impact. And so now he's now preparing them to look the other way if people start leaving. He's always just one step ahead of the game, right? And so I'm sitting back here and I'm being like, how do you guys not see how he's preparing you guys that if 100 people leave from here and 100 people leave from here, that it's okay. It's okay.
He wants you to believe he's prophesying is what he wants you to believe.
100%. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It is. It is. Okay. That was just a sidebar.
It's like
how can people be so gullible? That's the thing that I'm actually, how can they be so gullible? It's
I sit and I think about my parents and my family and my siblings who were we were the poor ones. So we were we licked the scum off the bottom of the barrel. And I try to think of how their mind would take in watching this Levitical Zoom meeting and how that they would be able to process that is okay. That this man who is now, we've realized that he has stated that he's not a man of God, he's just an intelligent man. So he has actually quoted that to somebody, and he's actually said, I'm not a man of God, I'm just an intelligent man. Oh. So these people have got to start putting these pieces together that your prophet is literally from some other planet smoking something and is not going to take you to where he says
he's not smoking. He's not smoking, no, Cheryl, please. No, he's drinking.
He's drinking. Right? He's drinking a lot.
But I mean, to clarify, there was the Levitical meetings, which was held by Zoom, which is supposed to be the kind of religious, central annual meeting. And then there was also, within a few days, there was what they called Strive 23, which was presentations by UBT and Campus & Co. and all the Brethren initiatives, all the rest of the ecosystem, as they call it. And that was an hour and a half, and every single one of those poor 55,000 slaves had to watch this. And of course, what it was, in its entirety from beginning to end, was an appeal to work harder, make more money, and make more profit.
Yeah, because 5 times more.
The brethren need money. In other words, Bruce Hales wants more. And think this is the family that's just made billions and billions. And I'm not exaggerating when I say billions. They have made billions and billions on government COVID contracts by extremely dubious means. They've got vastly more money than they could ever possibly spend. And they have the gall and the cheek to get on television and broadcast to 55,000 people holding out their hands, please, we want more money.
And specifically,
it just makes me feel sick.
They had it counted. They actually had it broken down on how much they could make in 2023. It's 5 times more profit, and it would bring in $90 million for the school.
It's
for the school, which
how much do they actually need for the school? But when you talk about the school, we had in the city where I'm living, they have basically there's the big school for the large area here. When I drove past that school, I was thinking, poor kids. Yeah. Because before, I don't know your generation or if it was before, but at least you were at schools with normal people.
Yes.
Yeah.
All
Yes,
right.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
you maybe had interaction, with some other people, but think about those poor kids these days. All they see day and night is cult indoctrination. The school, behind the school, they have built a huge new thing. It looks like a hangar. It's the church, a new church. I think Bruce Hale could actually fly with his plane directly into it. But it looks like a hangar, right? It's not a
Yes, yeah.
church.
Yeah.
But think of those kids. That's all they see.
Yeah.
Church, 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 church.
And it was after I left. So I left in fall of 1992, and it was right after that they introduced. It was, first of all, it was homeschooling at home, and then they created these schools. And in my personal opinion, when I listened to that Strive 23 or whatever it was, and then hearing just all this stuff that Mr. Hales is saying, I think he's starting to panic. So this is my personal opinion. I think he is starting to panic. And in his mind, he knows that he needs this money, right? And it's hard for them to see that. But us out here, we can see I mean, as Carmen says it's a train that's gotten so much, it's just going down. There's no way to stop the train that's coming at him. And I think he is panicked. Of course, he's not going to show that, but what's he going to do? He's going to ask for more money because he needs that more money, right? He needs that money to be able to, if this all goes down and this church dismantles itself, he needs to have that pot. And I just wish that, especially the females in there, could see that they don't need to go and do more volunteering at campus and co for their mental health, is what was said, is that, that they need more volunteers. It was just crazy listening to these recordings and thinking, how are you guys not seeing through this? And I'm like, I try to put myself back in there and try to be like you there's got to be some sort of waking up that happens here, because we're getting really ridiculous now with what kind of time commitment that they're asking for. They're going to be having such a time commitment, they're not even going to be able to attend church anymore. It's going to just be, we're going to work 24/7 and just take shifts.
Yeah.
I mean,
Cheryl does. Go for it.
Just tell a story. Just summarize something that Braden told us, because I think it's hugely important. And I just want as many people to understand this as possible. The brethren are told, of course, that all the money they raise goes to the school, it goes to education. Now, we know you can do simple sums. We know what the cost is of educating a child from kindergarten through to 12th grade. And we know that all the UBT and all its associated systems and campus and co raise vastly more money than they could possibly spend on education. And of course, we suspect, I mean, it's kind of obvious that money that surplus money is somehow finding its way into the hands of the Hales family. And Braden actually, for the first time, just gave us an example of how that happens. And this is what happened. The Brethren School, a large Brethren school in New Zealand, was instructed to purchase a very, very high value of educational furniture from Unispace, which is a Hales family business. And not only was were they instructed that they must purchase this, but the prices were astronomical. The prices were right through the roof. They could have got equivalent stuff for a fraction of the money. Now, one of the trustees of the school, who was responsible for finances, objected. He wouldn't sign off on this purchase. That trustee subsequently was put out of fellowship. The trustees that were pushing this purchase were also part of the Unispace business empire. Now, as far as Braden can make out, he can't actually prove this, but he thinks that maybe as many as 100 Brethren schools globally had to make this purchase from Unispace. So now you can see very simple technique. The brethren, they give their money to the school. It's tax-free, it's charitable money. They get their tax rebate on it. Then the school is forced and coerced into buying very, very highly overpriced educational furniture from Unispace. Now that money is in the pockets of the Hales family. Very, very simple money laundering tactic.
Yeah.
Now, there's a second layer to this that's even more nefarious, and that is that all this massive purchase all around the globe from Unispace occurred in the months leading up to Unispace being sold. Now, they sold Unispace for a very, very high value, and it's what is called a pump and dump, where you inflate the value of a business artificially by artificially generating sales. So it looks like it's making very high profit margins and higher sales. And in fact, it's artificial. So very clever, very intelligent man, Mr. Bruce Hales, as he likes to tell people. Not only does he manage to launder millions and millions of dollars from charitable educational giving into his own pocket, he then doubles up on that by using it to inflate the value of his business, which he then sells. Now that to me is, I think if you could peel the lid off that whole can of worms and look into it as God sees it from above, you would find he's doing exactly that same tactic in 1,000 different ways all around the globe.
Yeah.
The money that the brethren are pouring in to what they believe to be education and charitable purpose is ending up in the pockets of the Hales family.
I know how some of the money goes to the Hales family. Okay, I was working on something which was the donation money. How do you call it? Levitical givings or something?
Giving, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr. Hale gets so much more than others. There's not much fairness in there. Okay, but one question: why? What is he going to do with that money? When is he going to be happy? What's the purpose?
I don't know. I think that's why the world is the way it is all these men out there that, you know, use any tactic that they can to be able to pull this money in. And on top of this, like, so it's a private school, like you have to pay. So we found out, this was on one of our many calls that we've had, but a child has to send your child to one of these schools. You're paying $6,000 per child. They do have family fees that you can do. There's like, obviously, you know, if you've got 2 kids, it could be, you know, 10,000 instead or something like that. But it is literally, so you don't get to go to the school for free. These are private schools that you're paying. Yeah. Each person has to pay for their child to go to that. So like, I just don't get why you need this other $90 million to be going to the school. Like, that's one of the questions I'm hoping, you know, when my brother watches this, is that you got to question yourself. You had how many kids, and you're paying all that. Plus now they want to bring another $90 million into these schools. What does, like, are you building them out of gold? Right?
Well,
because it
top
sure
it
doesn't
all
look
off.
like that. It doesn't look like that from the outside. Like there's no reason to have $90 million go to your the schools. It's just, when it gets to be this crazy of a number, you've got to start thinking for yourself.
And for probably the poorest education that you can imagine, you know.
And we know it is, right?
I understand that a lot of the topics they are going to do it because it's on the curriculum, but very quickly, okay. And the focus is mainly on admin tasks for the girls and financial matters, accounting for the boys. But you know, all the other stuff, history, biology, all these things, completely forgotten. I mean, they do it. They do it, but very quickly. It's my understanding, you know. So, brethren families, I was saying, brethren families, are you happy that, you know, you pay so much for a school that actually is not really teaching much to your children, but using the money to go to the Hales?
Well, yeah, and I mean, what is it? It was just, I mean, there was a Hales, was it Dean Hales? Somebody who just bought a $7.5 million mansion with cash.
Yeah, but that's just for the land. He's going to demolish that and build something much better on it.
You know,
I can tell you an interesting story about the paying your school fees, because I was in the brethren in Cambridge, UK, and we had children in the school. We had to pay the school fees, and they wouldn't issue an invoice for the fees or a receipt for the fees. They said, the trustee of the school who was responsible for collecting the fees came up to each person individually at church, found a time or phoned you and said, your fees this year will be this much for the first child, this much for the second child, and so on. And he said, Mr. Hales says that this is a mandatory payment. And I found out later that they were telling the Inland Revenue Service, the tax service, that the school was free for the students, and any donations the parents made were voluntary. Mm-hmm. And then they got caught out because the tax service questioned this, and they kind of scurried around. This is like after they've been doing this for 2 years, they scurried around and gave out sort of backdated receipts and invoices because they had to admit that this was not a free school and the payments were not voluntary. But it was so blatant and open because, obviously, if they're not issuing the paperwork, obviously they're doing some kind of a scam. But the Brethren mentality is such that you don't question that. They know that they're special and that they don't really have to pay, they only pay taxes for appearance's sake. They don't feel guilty about that kind of activity. That's just one example of their, their mentality and the way that they will the criminal things quite openly go on between brethren.
What's also interesting, Richard, is also how they manage, to get something be purchased by the flock. So they make big advertisements of whatever it is, a book or a donation or something. They make the big thing out of it, and if you don't pay, if you don't want it, you start to feel guilty, and you are mad feeling guilty for not taking whatever you are supposed to.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, guilt tripping is a big thing.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of subtle ways to make you feel bad, and they're very good at telemarketing to each other. You get phone calls, you get emails, you go to the meeting hall and you'll find a leaflet under your windshield wiper. And they'll have people, standing at the gates of the meeting hall promoting the latest, what they call them, the initiatives. And Bruce Hales will say, so we must support the initiatives. And initiatives are fundraising. It's just raising money. You must buy this, you must buy that, you must buy your computer. And apparently with the COVID pandemic, they've gone over to Zoom. Their church meetings are done by Zoom. So now they all have to have a large screen television, but of course it must be one that can't access television channels. So of course this is all supplied by UBT. So suddenly this business, church business, whatever you want to call it, there's 55,000 brethren, so we could assume, how many households is that? 10,000 households? So suddenly they can sell 10,000 large screen televisions at any price they care to name, and 10,000 people have to buy them. Yeah. That's a pretty good business opportunity, isn't it?
Even in that Strive, what is it, Strive 23 that just happened with the Hales that we just were talking about, even in there, they brought up the whole photo album thing again, on how there was all the photo albums were being updated and being done again. So what happens is each place, each locality that has brethren in it, they all get their pictures done, they put it in a photo album, and you have to buy it. You sell it to all the other localities. And he had this long-winded speech about, how it's so nice to see a young kids picking up that, and they're looking through the photos, and it just makes them feel connected. He was going on and on with a bunch of bullshit. And I was thinking, what a way. See, you guys, you just don't realize how he just smoothed the butter right over top of your bread with there, and you didn't even realize it. So now they're all going to go out and they're going to be like, oh, well, we're getting all our photos done again, and you got to buy. How many would you think, Carmen, how many, when you have to buy all the photos, how many would it be?
Oh, a lot.
It's lots. And they're not cheap.
No.
Yeah, I mean, a set of Brethren photo albums takes up about 2 or 3 feet of shelf space.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's going to take you
do
back $500 or at least. Yeah.
Do you know that they have an app for that these days? Okay, photos.
Yes.
Uh,
Connect.
I mean,
Yeah.
I can't remember the name, but I was shown
Yeah.
it quite a few times. It was a favorite tool of young unmarried girls to find, and
Yeah.
vice versa, to find potential matches.
Their own dating map. Swipe right.
So
But,
talk about their phones a little bit. Have you ever picked up a UBT phone or touched it or looked at what's downloaded on it?
No, sorry. No, sorry, I didn't, because I really basically refused using that material. But I saw my colleagues using them. Okay,
Yeah.
It's just like the computer is quite limited with what they can do. But that is where you have to know that it's quite often the higher you go into the hierarchy, the more those people have devices that are not controlled, that don't have those controls. Why do I know that? Because I have quite often been asked, helping them to set them up.
Yeah.
So, dear brethren from the bottom, don't do what your leaders are doing.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think we should have a podcast with that name called Dear Brethren from the Bottom.
Yeah. And
You know, at work, what happened is there were all those younger people, and you could almost sense the hormones in the air, and the boys, they are not allowed. I didn't know that they are not allowed to even give a hug or touch another girl when it was a birthday or things like that. But so what are they doing? They are just hovering around like flies on a piece of shit, and it's just constantly that you can see that they're frustrated because they cannot have a normal type of relationship, right? It's
And then we end up with these men who are so abusive to their women.
Yeah. But Cheryl, I have been wondering quite a few times as to who is actually putting that sort of stuff into their brains. The dads, I have observed, the dads are quite often working. I don't know what their influence is in the education of their children, the upbringing of the children. But I have noticed that some of the mothers can be quite hardcore, when it comes to yeah. I think it's the women sometimes.
Yeah.
I asked the question to one of them towards the very end. I said, hey, if your child wanted to leave the church, what would you do? And she replied, oh, I would do everything I can to get my child back into the church. Yeah.
I really like how you laid out what you sent us. And because people have been asking for more of these educational podcasts and I'm trying to understand where we're coming from. I'm just going to go through some of this. So it might kind of seem like I'm going through a list, but I do want to go through this because people have been asking for this. And then when I saw you had put this out, I really wanted to address some of these. So you wrote on here about this disregard for police infringement and role. Like, what can you speak a little bit more onto that?
Yeah, so that was basically a younger girl, I mean adult, but younger, and she got caught drink driving, and she got a fine. But what happened is when they called her father to pick her up, Dad couldn't because he was also inebriated. But then the following days she was constantly, oh, police, they should not have given me a fine. I will do it again. That was a disrespect of the standard rule of the land, which is it's not right. The rule applies to everyone.
And I mean, and that is very much their belief, right? They believe they're above the law. It's one of the things that I've really tried to get through with the lead investigator with me, is that I've been trying to tell him, like, you've got to understand that they have no respect for the laws of the land. And I mean, we know now through RRT, and you can watch those things where they try and cozy up to those kinds of people. And it's so funny because they're cozying up to these people with their charity of RRT, yet behind the scenes, that if the police was to try and lay something down with them, right, they would just completely disregard it because they believe that they're above it. Yeah, and it is drilled into you as you get that's very much the feeling that you get as a kid growing up, right? You sit there and you talk to kids your own age, and you are above the law.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna go. So you got to hear about the treatments of animals. Let's go into that.
Now, I love animals, okay? So that one was a big shocker. But what happened is two things. One of them was for a birthday of one of the brethren girl. Another one, younger than the first one, decided to offer her a fish. And she used a relatively tiny vase to put that fish in. Okay, and I have fish. It's probably what you can hear in the background here. Fish needs correct environment. All right. The following day, I said, "How is the fish doing?" "Oh, he's dead. One of the kids has fed the whole, thing of the whole little box of food." I was thinking, wow, that was really looking well after the fish. But there was another one that was even more shocking. They picked up a stray kitten. So for a little while, they were actually looking after that kitten, and it was allowed in the family. But at some point, one of the girls said, "Hey, look, do you know someone who would want, a young cat?" Had grown up, of course. And I said, "No, I'm sorry, I don't." And a little bit later, I hear that the cat has been euthanized.
Oh,
so.
wow.
So I go to the father and I say, "Hey, what's the story? Why, did you really not have any other option than getting the cat euthanized if you didn't want it? And why did you not want it?" "Oh, it was distracting the children from their Bible studies, whatsoever they called it."
Wow.
So, yep.
Wow.
No.
I don't even have words. I'm a hardcore animal lover, and wow.
That didn't go down with me very well. It's
Yeah, there's much worse than that. There's much
I can
worse
imagine.
than that. I mean, in Australia, because I mean, I lived in the UK and I lived in Canada, and brethren would go to Australia for special meetings, because of course that's where the houses are. So that tended to be where a lot of the special church meetings were, and they would stay with families out there, and particularly like the younger brothers, what they would do for if they had like an evening or a Saturday of time to spend, they would take their overseas visitors out, and they regard this as a kind of sport. They'll drive out into the ranch lands and run over kangaroos with their vehicles. So they have these pickup trucks, and they'll just chase this kangaroo till exhausted and then just run over it. And they'll come back with all these stories about doing this.
Oh yeah, pride of it. They need to get a life.
Sickening. It's just sickening. And it's kind of, it comes down to
there's a history with that, isn't there? Did not one of the leaders at one of the tailors forbid suddenly people having pets?
Yes, exactly. Yes, I mean that happened in the late 60s. I mean, I remember my parents telling me they used to have a cat called Drusilla, and said, well, when the ministry came out about pets, we had to have it put down. And I sort of didn't think too much about it. But when I left the brethren and started reading accounts, I realized that this one man gives the word, and all around the world, thousands of cats and dogs were put to death just because this guy says so.
Yeah.
And in fact,
why? Where is it written in the Bible?
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, no, it's because I think he felt threatened. He thought, well, maybe they love their cat more than they love me. But yeah, brethren typically have very little respect or feeling or regard for animals.
And the environment, okay? They don't really care too much. As one of my, we discussed that with my colleagues, that lack of looking after, recycling and that sort of things. And one of my colleagues who knows quite a bit about the brethren said, "Oh, look, the rapture is coming, so they don't really have to care about the planet."
Well, that is exactly their attitude.
That's really their attitude, isn't it?
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. It's just, And it's that one man controlling everybody, right? People will challenge us on us using this word cult, and
It is.
I'm hoping that a podcast like that, we're kind of like breaking this down in so many things that they can see that it's been a cult for a long time. Bruce Hales has just really put the explosion on it at being a cult. It is very much a cult. It is my personal opinion that if they were told to drink some Kool-Aid to go home and to exit this planet, I believe that they would do it.
They would do it. Yeah.
And it is one of the things. It is, I don't know why it's so on me right now. It's just one of those things that is really it's just on my brain a lot right now, that I don't want that to happen. And I'm hoping that with as much as exposure that we can do, that enough of them hear that if that command was given out, that they wouldn't do it, right? Or that they would at least question it. And I know people think I'm crazy for saying this, but I think when you sit down and you look at the realistic nature of what is happening right now, with the amount of money that is there, like this, Bruce Hales is not, he's not just a subtle man. He's extravagant. He's very vivacious. He's very cutthroat. He's very, I gotta have it all or nothing, right? He's very much that type of a personality. And I mean, you look at all these other things where they had these mass suicides happen, right? Nobody was going to question it. Like, I just think that it's something that we all need to keep at the forefront, that this Bruce Hales is not even Mr. Simonton. He's not even his dad. Bruce Hales is taking this church to a whole other level of control.
Absolutely.
It's not a church anymore. It's not a church anymore.
No.
Okay. I mean, it hasn't. It's a cult. It doesn't really have a religious connotation anymore to it.
No, not at all.
It's
not, no.
It's business. It's a lot of business. That's all it is. Money.
Mm.
And my opinion is that the money, because with money you can buy, politicians and all that sort of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Christine, we're very, very grateful that you came on and were able to really give us an inside look at your views from being on the outside, because it's important. I think it's important that we have people that were our non-brethren and that had all these altercations, all this kind of, like, when you sit here and describe them, it is as if you were born and raised in it.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And it shouldn't be like that. Right? If they are really truly have this doctrine of separation, you should not know what you know, and you shouldn't have experienced what you have experienced if they have this doctrine of separation the way that they think that they have it.
Yeah. And if they were true Christians, I wouldn't have experienced those things. Okay.
No, you
I
wouldn't
have never seen. I mean, I'm a Catholic. Okay. I'm not going to church whatsoever, but I learned about Jesus and love. That is the one thing that I have not seen within the brethren. Love, real love for someone else. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't ask for loving non-brethren, but love between themselves. Not seen anything like that. There's absolutely
really
nothing.
lacks. They really lack the compassion, like that human compassion that is just innately in us when we see people struggling, when we see the world struggling. That's what I have a hard time wrapping my head around, is like how brainwashed my mother would have been to not get me the help that I needed. And she wasn't even born into it. She was born into it when she was in her teenage. So, there was that much control and brainwashing put on her to not even be able to help her own child. Right.
I mean, to put a system, whatever it is, okay, I call it a cult, but to put that system above your own family, people have to think again.
Yeah.
Mm.
All right. You have to think again. Your family comes first, not the church you belong to.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to attach somehow, when we air this, I'll try and attach your article, because it was so well written. It's very well written, and I know it's going to have a lot of resonance with other people that have worked for the brethren. We have a list of people that we want to bring on here that have worked for them, but I really wanted you to be this first one that we brought on. just because you had experienced so much and you were so articulate with it in explaining literally the hell that you went through. So we're very, very grateful having you on. Is there anything else that you want to add?
Yeah, just a message to the brethren. Should you ever think of doing anything very nasty to myself or to my family or to my animals, think again, okay? Because the shit could hit the fan. You may not like the consequences, okay? Sorry, but I needed to tell them.
No,
Yeah.
what a way to end it. And it is. I mean,
I'm not scared.
no,
I'm not
and
scared.
I'm not either.
I was
And-
at some point. I was at some point, but I'm no longer scared. You know, it's
And it's nice. Richard's got a whole army behind him and they're willing to come in behind us. So we have a whole army there. So anyhow, thank you so much, Christine.
welcome.
For coming
thank
on.
you
very
And
much.
you are welcome on at any time again if you want to further clarify anything. But thank you so much for joining us.
And you are doing a great job, guys. Okay. Seriously, you are doing a very great job here.
Much love.
To share your story or be a guest on the show, email info.getalife@proton.me.